Hey friends, before we begin the video, I want to say thank you to all the recent subscribers. You guys are amazing. I see all of your comments every day. And to all the OGs who have been around for the past 2 years, this is such an amazing community. That's all I really wanted to say. Not going to drag it on for too long. I hope you guys enjoy these videos or these stories. And I hope you enjoy the guest star on today's video as well, Selestial Norre. Super talented and super cool to get him on the video. Alright, enjoy. So, to start this story, I was best friends with a girl named Charlie for 3 years. I loved her, and I thought she loved me, but that wasn't true. 5th grade preliminary school. Back in 5th grade, I had been transferred to a new school. The whole class knew each other from the year before, and I was a complete outcast. I met Charlie at the school open house, and apparently we sat at the same table. She was really nice and bubbly, and she liked to get to know me. I wanted a friend, and she was there. Sparing the details of awkward preteens trying to get through school, we became fast friends. We got each other Skype and talked day and night. We called nearly every day and would just talk for hours. She made me laugh, and we could talk about anything. I also became friends with Charlie's friends Catherine and Addison. We were a group of kids and had fun, but things changed subtly over time. Charlie became more depressed, mentioning she had been diagnosed with depression and anxiety disorders. I did my best to comfort her. "What are friends for?" I assured her. A diagnosis didn't change anything, and it's a good thing she's getting help for the issues. She agreed, but I don't think she really believed it. I'm not entirely sure when it started, but Charlie started venting to me about her emotions. I always listened and tried to help when I could find the words. I was the shoulder to cry on, and I was happy I could help in some way. It felt like repaying her for picking up a new nobody who wandered into her friend's group. She never even got better though. She started to get more extreme and more serious breakdowns. She would call herself worthless, claiming she could tell that her parents hated her. I'd met her parents by that point, and they were loving people. They clearly cared about her, and I told her so. She called me a liar, saying that I should just leave her to self-destruct and stop pretending I care. I was heartbroken. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The next day at school, she seemed to be doing better, smiling and joking with our friends. I tried to ask her about the night before, but she got a very serious look on her face, and she sounded angry, telling me that it doesn't matter anymore. I didn't pry, figuring she would talk about it later. That night I asked her again, but I got a similar answer from before. I was confused, but just went with it. I wish I hadn't. It went for months like that. Her breaking down, spiraling, calling me a liar, a cheat, and saying I hated her guts. Every attempt to comfort her or deny the accusations were met with liar. It became routine. Charlie broke the routine by adding something new. She started to openly hurt herself in school. When she messed up, answered a question wrong, or sometimes for no reason, she'd take a mechanical pencil and start scratching her arm, holding it just to show me and her friends exactly what she was doing. Whenever we tried to stop her, she'd snap at us, saying to stop pretending we care and to shut up, or don't touch me. We didn't know what to do, we were just kids. The summer after 5th grade went pretty well. She seemed to be getting a bit better, with less spiraling breakdowns. We talked every day, and before we knew it, the summer was over. 6th grade, middle school. We were a year older and in a new school. We were still a group, me, Charlie, Catherine, and Addison. This is when Charlie got worse again. She started having breakdowns during school and openly self-harming more. I was constantly worried for her. I didn't think there was a full day that whole year that I could relax and not worry about her hurting herself. If memory serves, I have a lot of trouble remembering these years in detail. It was the year she first messaged me saying that she wanted to kill herself. She explained how she could do it, and how easy it would be, and how no one would care if she was gone. I was crying, hysterically trying to calm her down and say how much I cared about her, and how I didn't know what to do without her. She ended the conversation saying that she wouldn't do it. I was beyond relieved, and made sure to check up on her the next day at school. She insisted that it wasn't that bad, and that I had overreacted. I still insisted that she be honest about those feelings, and tell an adult if she was really thinking about suicide. Charlie promised she would. The rest of the year remained pretty consistent, with a steady incline of severity of her breakdowns, but slow enough that I had hardly noticed the change. 7th grade, middle school. This was the year shit really hit the fan. This year is very fuzzy in memory, so I'll just have to hit the main points. Charlie was starting to struggle in school. When she was immediately great at something, she gave up. She just stopped trying. The open self-harm got worse, going as far as to shout at me if I tried to stop her. But she was still my best friend. I loved her, and she loved me, right? We could talk to each other about anything. Except when I tried to vent to her, she'd say that I was making it all about me, or that she couldn't handle it right then. If she was having trouble, I tried to relate to her issues and give her advice. She'd say that I was making it about myself, and that I'm not her parent. This year I started to really question my gender. I met my actual best friend, and my now platonic partner, Liz. We were two broken trans kids, so deep in the closet we couldn't admit that we were trans. Liz was the first to come out, and I welcomed her with open arms, gushing about how much stuff we could do together. Charlie didn't like Liz. She was clearly jealous and thought Liz was taking me from her. I reassured her that I still cared about her, and that she was still my number one, but she didn't believe me. About the middle of the school year, Charlie said that she might have a crush on me, and she asked if I would be opposed to being her romantic partner. At the time, I was very in denial about my sexuality, aromantic asexual, and said I wouldn't mind it. She seemed to take this as me consenting to some kind of relationship. She became much more touchy, hugging me, and even kissed my head or forehead a few times. I don't know why at the time, but these actions made me incredibly uncomfortable, and I wanted to shrivel up and hide. I now know it's because I'm touch averse, but at the time I hated myself for these reactions. I beat myself up inside for recoiling from my best friend, and how dare I get grossed out. I very quickly fessed up to the discomfort, telling her that I didn't actually want to date her, and that we weren't together, and that I wasn't comfortable with the amount of physical contact she was giving. She seemed to understand, apologized for being touchy, and even joking a bit about being touch-starved. After that, she started to get really distant when we were in person, and not just physical distance. She seemed to avoid talking to me for long, and made any excuse to shut me up. The nightly routine of breakdown, rush, and roulette, or whether it be a couple sentences or 4 hours, continued. Warning, this section forwarded talks about suicide threats. There was a few different times she threatened suicide. More than once she said it'd be my fault. One particular standout night, she sent me a video. There was Charlie sitting in her bedroom next to the toilet. Paraphrased, it would be so easy for me to just end it. I could drown myself in the toilet, and no one would know. I'd be quiet, and no one would care. My parents don't give a shit. I texted her over and over again, begging for her not to do it, saying I loved her. Her parents loved her, and that I'd miss her. I cried so much I got dehydrated. I stayed up past midnight just waiting for her to respond, but she didn't. I thought she was dead. I thought she had killed herself and that it was my fault, that I should have gotten to her sooner. I cried myself to sleep that night. When I got to school, I saw her walking to class. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest. I ran up and hugged her and wept and begged her for an answer, asking where she'd been, saying I thought she had died. And paraphrased again. She chuckled, "Geez, I'm sorry. I forgot to check my phone last night." It felt like everything stopped. I just stared at her, this person who I loved for years, who I'd looked after, talked to, cared for, and couldn't live without, just laughed about it. I didn't know what to say. I was so dumbfounded that I tried to act normal. My whole view of her shattered that day, and it was the beginning of the end. That year droned on, and I slowly started to push away from Charlie. I still cared deeply for her, but I couldn't take it anymore. Her heartbreaks and ramblings and venting was daily. I just couldn't handle her berating me. I felt terrible, like I was abandoning her. It felt like leaving a person with a broken foot to walk 1,000 stairs themselves. But I had to get away. I started talking to our mutual friend about what she did, and was doing. They said that it was terrible, and couldn't believe she was saying such things. I showed them the conversations, feeling even more guilty for showing off her private text to other people. I had to prove it though. I had to make them believe me. In the end, I did get away from Charlie. I think my other friends did too, but they didn't do much for me. They shut me out, and while I was broken, healing from a 3-year-long wound, they talked about me behind my back, added fuel to my fire, only to tell me that I'd only ever talk about Charlie. I lost pretty much all my friends that year. I tried to resettle back into my group of friends at first, but it wasn't the same as before. I was constantly worried that they were talking about me behind my back, and I was terrified that they saw me on the same level as Charlie, so I left that group. It was for the best in the end. It's been a few years now, and I can say with certainty that I have trauma from those years of abuse. This post is by no means detailed enough to capture the horrific experience that was my time with Charlie as a friend, but I don't want to reopen old wounds. I'm still great friends with Liz, and she honestly saved me from Charlie's reign of terror. Her kindness and friendship contrasted with Charlie's everything woke me up to how awful it was. I don't hate Charlie, despite all that she did to me. She was a terrible person and an absolute monster of a human. But we were just kids. I know that I'm not the same person I was back then, and I figure that she isn't either. Everyone deserves a second chance in life. But Charlie, let's never meet again. This story takes place when I was about 16 to 17 years old. I lived with just my dad in a little apartment in a questionable area. It was the type of area you'd not want to be out and about when the sun goes down. Up until a certain time, like 10 to 11 p.m., there would be a cop or two in the area patrolling, making sure that there was no gang-related activities going on. I had a job at a restaurant in the city, which was about a 30-minute car ride and an hour-and-a-half train ride. The train was a couple of blocks away from my place, and since my dad was always too lazy or hungover to drive me, that was my main form of transportation. I went to work at around 3 p.m. and would usually get home at around 12 or 1 a.m. This was my schedule 4 days a week, aside from having school. I would see a lot of familiar faces on the train because of this, but we never made conversation with each other. Until one night, when I got out of work late because of some assholes who wanted to sit in the restaurant past closing. Thanks to them, I missed my train. The next one wasn't scheduled to arrive for another hour, so having nowhere to go and no money for a Lyft or Uber, I sat there waiting. No one was around me, so when this older man showed up, kinda staggering a bit, I assumed he was another drunken hobo in the city trying to catch a train to sleep in. Something about the face gave me deja vu, but I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I've seen him on the train here and there. He made his way over to me, much to my discomfort, and started up a conversation. He wasn't slurring, but the way he looked down at me gave me goosebumps. He asked me why I was out there, so late and all by myself. I had to reply to him as to not anger him. I mean, we were alone, and he was close enough to pull out a knife or something. Anyways, I told him that I was waiting for the train, and he asked which one. Now the train was color-coded with a strip at the top to indicate whether it was going north, south, east, or west areas. I took blue, but I lied and said I took green. He looked at the schedule above the benches and saw that the green train was coming in about 15 minutes, and he said he'd keep me company. For those extremely long 15 minutes, he asked me how long I'd been working at the so-so restaurant. This made my blood run ice cold. I never told him where I worked. I just looked at him and very timidly answered, for a year. And he laughed. He said, "Wow, it's already been a whole year, huh?" At this point, my skin was itching out of anxiety, and as soon as the green train came, I knew I had no choice but to take it. I said goodbye to him and thanked him for the chat, hoping that it would be the end of it. Nope. He suddenly told me that he took the green train too, so he followed me on and sat in the seat behind me. My mind was racing about whether he was going to try or do something to me, like chloroform me and hurt me in some other way. But we rode the train in silence. I was trying to figure out how I was going to lose him. There weren't many people riding the train at the late hour. Our car was empty, unfortunately. As the ride went on in menacing silence, I could feel him staring down at the back of my head. I waited until we got to the stop where there was another person, and I was so relieved to see a woman sitting there. She wasn't boarding, so I immediately got off the train and the man followed me. As expected, I took a seat on the bench next to hers, close enough for her to see and hear everything going on, hoping she would catch on. The man noticed that I was sniffling, allergies plus being in the cold, and asked if I was sick. I told him no, but he insisted on giving me these weird pills he had, and they were supposedly cold medicine. I declined in a louder voice. "Sorry, I don't accept pills from strangers." This prompted the lady to look at us and make eye contact with her. She knew now. Now, this went on until a blue train came and the lady got up, giving me a look that told me to get on with her. So, without explanation, I did. She waved me over to sit next to her, and when the man tried to follow, she said, "No, you go sit over there," and made him sit a couple of seats across from us. He chose the one where he could face us and stared at me the entire time. I was shaking and about to burst into tears. The woman leaned over and whispered to me that she had a pistol. I felt safer with her there. We whisked back and forth about what happened, and I told her where I lived and how I was worried that he would follow me home. She told me a friend of hers would be boarding the train soon, and when he did, she told me his name was Ray. Ray was filled in about everything and agreed to escort me home. She promised me that I could trust him, and the two of them waited for me until I got to my stop. The man still watching me started to smile widely, resembling the Shire cat. He shouted, "This is your place, right?" To which I didn't respond, and just gave the woman a hug and thanked her. Ray and I hurried and hopped off the train, and as I looked back, I saw that woman had pulled out her pistol, and told the man to sit back down, even blocking the exit with her body. I finally let myself cry in relief. Ray rocked me home and tried to calm me down by telling me about his job and family. After watching me get inside the gates of my apartment safely, I thanked him profusely for his help. It chills me to think about how that night would have turned out if I hadn't met up with that woman and her friend. I feel extremely lucky to this day. I never saw that man again, and eventually stopped thinking about him, but in the back of my head, that creepy, aroused smile of his was burned into my mind, and I couldn't help but wonder just what else he knew about me. This happened about 7 years ago, in the summer of 2014. I went to a local college for a few years, and my two friends were back in town for the summer. All of our parents were home that night, so the three of us decided to drive around looking for a place to chill and smoke a bowl. We stopped at a local park right off the main road, pulling up to this windy, gravelly road in the empty parking lot. It was a soccer field that was pretty open, and the field was surrounded by tall trees. We got out and walked a little ways into the field, probably about 150 feet from the car, started smoking and chatting. Now, this area is close to a pretty big airport, so there were always big planes flying by, and this night was no different. At this point, it was around 9:30 to 10, so it was dark out. After less than 10 minutes, we saw other car headlights pull up the gravel road and into the parking lot. I noticed it was a pickup, and it parked right next to my friend's car. The three of us didn't really know what to do and just kind of looked at each other. We looked very conspicuous, and we were a bit worried someone had come to kick us out. The park was closed. The car turned off and two people got out and started walking towards us. We decided just to play it cool. They walked right up to us. It was a man and a woman who looked like they were in their late 50s to early 60s. The man wasn't wearing a shirt and had cargo shorts on, and was wearing glasses. The woman was paler. She had blonde hair and a little scraggly. She also looked like she was wearing glasses, but it was hard to tell, and they probably didn't have as thick of a frame as the man's. It was dark, so I didn't get a great look at them, even though they were right next to us. The man said, "What's up? Are you here to see the lights?" "No idea what that means," we mumbled. "What do you mean about the lights?" "The lights," he said. "They're all over. Can't you see them?" He pointed at the sky, and I realized he was talking about the stars. "They're everywhere tonight. Look at the planes. They can't even get into the sky." And as he was talking about looking at the sky, and he just randomly got excited and shouted, "Look, there's one now." We looked up and just saw some planes taking off and landing. He was in utter amazement. He looked like he was breathless with wonder, and he started wandering off by himself with his hands on his head, looking at the sky and muttering. The woman stayed with us and started talking about how they've been tracking the movement for months. "Those stars are angels," she said. "They're getting stronger and stronger, which is why their planes are being forced to land." According to her, this night was the most active they've ever been. And after a couple of minutes, which lined up pretty well with the woman's story, the man returned. He said, "You know what this means, right? Jesus is coming back. His angels are getting ready. The planes are already going haywire and falling out of the sky." They were looking at the sky and kept pointing out planes that would fly by the stars. All of them. Because there were a lot of stars out. When a plane would pass by a bright star, they would get really excited and act like the pilot just escaped death. So the three of us were just a bit freaked out. They seemed pretty invested in the sky, so after a pause, my friend piped up and said that we should get going, because it's getting pretty late. They exchanged friendly goodbyes with us. I shook the man's hand, and the lady leans in to hug me. And I'm just like, okay, sure. And then she kisses me on the cheek. I got a pretty good look at her then, and I realized that she wasn't wearing glasses. And she had some of the most wild-looking eyes I've ever seen. Open really wide, and this piercing stare. And they were like bright blue, almost silver. Just a very, very strange vibe. That little part stayed with me the most, making sure that they were still in the field that way. We were quiet until we got back on the main road, and then just said, "What the fuck was that?" I had a feeling that they were some kind of doomsday preppers, or part of a fundamentalist section, and that the man was probably on psychedelics. The woman was more lucid. I hope she was the one that drove. They didn't seem aggressive or like they wanted to harm us, but also a little unpredictable. So weird Armageddon couple we met at the soccer field. If we meet again, Armageddon out of there. Let's not meet.
This story happened back in 2006, but I only learned what happened in 2017 from my mom. I was born and raised in Bordeaux, France, so French is my first language. At the time this happened, I was 3, so in 2006, and I slept in an upstairs bedroom pretty high up, like it was impossible to climb through my window without making a ton of noise. The house we lived in was also very old, and the front door was this massive wooden carved door that made a ton of noise when you opened it. So the only way to get in was to go through the backyard door, which was locked every night. So this was a regular night. My parents and I eat dinner at 8 p.m. My mom reads me a bedtime story, and I go to sleep. It's also good to note that my mom was pretty heavily pregnant at this time, about 8 months in. So she had trouble sleeping and woke up frequently, as it was almost summertime and pretty hot during the day and night. I fell asleep, and towards 1 a.m. I think, I woke up to a man standing in front of me, on the side of my bed. There's a little bit of light flickering through my window from the street, so I can see that his eyes are open and pointed straight at me. I don't remember what exactly I said, but it must have been something like, "Dad?" And the guy just replied, "You're so pretty." Now, mind you, I was 3, so I did what I knew how to do best. I didn't say anything, turned away from him and pretended to be sleeping. At this point, I clearly remember praying that he would just leave because I knew that his voice was not my dad. Somehow I went back to sleep, but I got woken up by a loud noise later on. It was still dark and I could hear my parents talking downstairs. I thought they were just doing adult stuff and I went back to sleep because I was tired as hell at this point. I got woken up again by my mom swinging the door open asking if I was okay. I was super sleepy at that moment, which is probably why I said yes instead of talking about the guy in my room. I remember her walking to my bed and giving me the biggest hug of my life and kissing me on the forehead. I fell back asleep in her arms sometime later. Now, flash forward to a couple of years later in 2017. I was at dinner again with my parents and talking about all the dumb stuff me and my brother did when we were little. I suddenly remembered the incident and for some reason got the urge to ask my mom about it. So I ask and say, "Hey, remember that time when you opened up the door in the middle of the night and you were pregnant with my brother and asking if I was okay? That was weird, right?" I'm laughing, but my gut's telling me there's something I didn't know. My mom went pale, turned to me, and said, "You mean that time I saw a man exiting your bedroom in the middle of the night and chased him down the house?" I'm sorry, what? I guess since it happened when I was little and very sleepy, my brain didn't really process the thing as something that really happened. This whole time I thought I had just dreamed it, hence the laugh when I asked. So basically that night, my mom couldn't sleep. She heard a noise, voices, and thought it was only me sleep talking when it was really me and the guy having this little conversation mentioned earlier. I guess her mother instinct kicked in because she got an eerie feeling and a few minutes later decided to go check it out and opened her bedroom door. His back to her and she was just speechless. The guy turned to her and they made eye contact. He just starts running down the stairs. My mom grabbed a heavy-ass Nokia flip phone and just threw it at him. My dad then woke up and noticed that his wife wasn't in bed anymore, and he hears the noises downstairs. He flipped out. At this point, my mom was chasing the guy down the stairs and throwing shit at him. The guy jumped over the railing of the stairs and darted left towards the back door, which was wide open. He jumped the fence into the night. The fence was also very fucking high, and to this day, my parents have no idea how he jumped so high in one jump. Like he just ran and jumped over it like Spider-Man. My dad finally reaches the bottom of the stairs and asks my mom what the hell is happening. She explains it to him, and they decide to call the police. Just then, my mom remembered that she heard voices in my room and goes, "Oh my god, he was in Marie's room!" Marie being me. She darted back upstairs and opened the door, to which I wake up. She asked if I was okay, and I reply, "Yeah, why?" She was freaked out and hugged, you know the rest. The cops came and swept the house. My dad's cell phone was missing, along with both their wallets. My mom's phone hadn't been stolen since it was in their room, and she threw it at the guy when she was chasing him. The weirdest part of it all is that my room was at the very end of the hall and not accessible any other way, which means he was trapped in there if someone found him in there. This means that he specifically came into my room, and if he came in to steal things, why did he come into my room and just looked at me sleeping? I also find it weird that he didn't do anything to me, as crazy as it sounds. Like, he could have done anything, but he just stood there. In the end, the investigation proved that my mom had forgotten to lock the door that night, which is how he got in. They never found the guy and probably never will. which scares me a little, not gonna lie. We moved out since then, but this still scares me to this day, and the fact that anything could have happened that night chills me to my very core. To preface this, I love to drive. Like hour-long drives to nowhere with no destination in mind. Just me, my music, and the road ahead of me. Living in Nebraska, I'd often take the back roads or lonely highways cutting through the countryside to small towns, and eventually cities. And I usually take these drives at night, since there was way less traffic to worry about. I've done it since I'd had my license 4 or 5 years ago, and I've never once had any sort of issue. Nor have I ever run into any trouble. That was until a few nights ago. For reference, I'm a relatively small 22-year-old female, and as I've stated before, I often take these drives completely and utterly alone. They're a good way to clear my head when I'm stressed, upset, or overwhelmed, or for me to get a plan together to sort some personal issues out. I've also done these long and lonely drives to get away from the toxicity of my household when I used to live with my parents as a means of coping with their alcoholism. Though now that I've moved out and I'm in a much better place mentally, I don't really have the urge to get in my car and just drive anymore. However, on the night this event took place, I was feeling pretty overwhelmed, stressed, and anxious with a clusterfuck of personal issues that I'd rather not get into. I felt restless and irritable around my boyfriend, couldn't focus on anything else, and decided I would take a drive to clear my head. My boyfriend was understanding and told me to be careful and not to be gone for too terribly long, since it was getting pretty late. I agreed, gave him a kiss goodbye, and left. I drove around our city for about 30 minutes, but I was still feeling on edge about everything transpiring in my personal life. So I decided to drive further north, down those familiar dark, winding, one-lane highways. I kept the car at a steady 65 miles an hour, taking the turns at a slower pace in case a deer jumped out around the bend, and was just admiring the vast empty darkness of the snow-capped fields and barren trees. It was honestly a bit creepy being all alone with no cars in sight, in seemingly the middle of nowhere. The few houses miles back from the road, lightless and dead cornfields, withered away and covered in the snow. It was like something out of a horror movie, and I half expected to see a ghost pop up in my rearview mirror, or see someone clamber out of the patches of trees dotting their horizon. The only light came from my headlights, and even then I still strained to see through the inky darkness of the night. By now it was just after 11, and I told myself that once I made the familiar roundabout that would either take you to a small town or back up towards the city, I would head back to the city and home. That roundabout was still maybe 15 or 25 minutes away, but other than my imagination picturing the worst, I really wasn't all that concerned. I mean, I was by myself. I didn't have any other motorists to worry about, right? Wrong. As I'm rounding another bend, I notice a vehicle with its hazards flashing, maybe a quarter of a mile or something away from me. It was some sort of sedan, dark-colored, and was angled to where only part of it was on the shoulder, while the rest was jutted out onto the road, like they had to pull over in a hurry, but didn't quite manage to do that. The driver's side door was flung wide open, and as I slowed my vehicle down and angled it towards the opposite side of the road to pass, I could make out what looked like maybe blood on the inside of the open door. I didn't see anyone on the road or in the car, and I was the only motorist in sight. Cell phone reception is spotty at best in this part of the country, but more often than not, you couldn't get reception no matter how hard you prayed, which was definitely the case when I took a glance at my phone to see if I had any service. So a lone female on the road at night, pulling up near a vacant vehicle that looks like someone had been attacked on the inside with no cell service. Now, I'm no dummy. I've watched countless episodes of Investigation Discovery and Criminal Minds, and read far too many crime books to know that this had bad and danger written all over it. But there was still a small part of me that was worried about something terrible that had happened to whoever was in the vehicle, and I thought I needed to help. These roads don't get a lot of traffic late at night, and temperatures were well below freezing. If someone were hurt or in trouble, there was no one and nothing else to help them but me. Still, I erred on the side of caution. I was still driving my car, though a bit more slowly, and as I approached the vehicle, I rolled down my passenger window a bit, shut off the music, and called out, "Hey, anyone there? Are you okay?" I didn't hear a response. I worried that they were passed out somewhere, but I wasn't about to go out and look for them. I told myself I'd call out one last time, and if I didn't hear anything, I would leave, and the moment there was reception, I'd call it in. And if I did hear someone, well, I'd figure out my next course of action then. So again I shout, "Hey, what happened? Are you okay?" There was a silence for a beat, and then I heard rustling in the shadows of the trees, followed by a gruff voice saying, "Yeah." I was relieved at first, and was about to say something in response, or possibly even stop my car and get out, when I noticed three things nearly simultaneously. As I inched my way past the front of the sedan, I noticed there was no damage to the hood or anyone else on the vehicle, which I found to be strange considering the blood on the inside of the door. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glance of someone coming out from behind the sedan, and they were making their way towards my car fast. The person did not have any blood on them, or appeared to be injured in any way, wearing a mask. Not like a face mask for COVID or a ski mask or anything normal, but one of those masks that you would see in the Purge movies. And they were holding something in their hand. I don't know what it was, I couldn't get a good look, but from its length and shape, I'm guessing maybe it was a tire iron or crowbar or something. I don't need to tell you that I slammed the gas the moment I noticed those things and drove like a bat straight out of hell, my heart thundering in my chest, and my entire body shaking. My window was still rolled down in my haste, and the music was still shut off, so I could very clearly hear someone, definitely a man, shouting at me, though I had no clue what they were saying. I just knew I had to get out of there immediately. I stole one last look at my rearview mirror as I drove away, mostly to see if they were getting in their sedan to follow chase or if they had stopped. The man with the weapon was still standing in the middle of the road watching me, and right before I looked away from the mirror, I saw a second man emerge from the trees that had been rustling earlier, also wearing one of those creepy masks with no trace of blood on him. I probably broke every law for speeding that night, but I just wanted to get as far away from those men as possible. As soon as I made it to the roundabout, I turned towards town, parked in the Walmart parking lot that thankfully still had cars from who I assume were workers closing up shop, and proceeded to have a full-on meltdown. When I could pull myself together, I called one of my friends, T, who was a police officer, to tell him what happened and ask what I should do. He was concerned for me, and after asking if I was okay and where I was, did they follow me, etc., he told me since it was out of city limits, he couldn't do much on his end, but he could get in contact with the local police and sheriff in that jurisdiction. They could tape my statement and check it out. I agreed, thanked him, and while I waited for the police to show up, I called my boyfriend. Through my hysterical sobs and panic, I managed to tell him what happened not even 10 or so minutes ago. He was, as you can imagine, super freaked for my safety and wanted me to either come home immediately or drive down himself to take me home. I told him the police were on their way to take my statement, so I couldn't leave, and that it was okay. But I stayed on the phone with him until I saw the familiar police cruisers pulling into the lot. I gave the police my statement, and they assured me that they would go back to the spot I told them the sedan had been to take a look, and that they would try to catch the guys who did it. Though with no cameras and no description of the men, I wasn't sure they'd be able to. I didn't even get the license plate number, though at the time of my panic, the thought never came to my mind until the police were asking if I got it. All they had to go off of was a dark-colored sedan and two guys with masks. After I gave my statement, I went home and stayed curled up close to my boyfriend the whole night. Listening to every sound in the house made him fear that it would be those guys arriving any minute to finish whatever they had started. Since that incident, I haven't heard back from the police, whether or not they have any leads, and I'm not sure they ever will. I'm just thankful I'm still here and that I didn't stop my car or get out. I'm not sure what would have become of me if I had. I still have so many questions that have no answers. What were they doing and why? Was that blood on the inside of the car, or just a ruse to get more attention? If it was really blood, did they hurt someone else? What would have happened to me if I had stopped my car? Needless to say, I won't be going on any more late-night drives to anywhere, and I hope I never cross paths with those freaks again.
Hey friends, I really hope you enjoyed today's video, and a really big thank you to Selestial Norre for joining me on today's video. Super talented, amazing narrator. You guys should show him some love. I'm going to put a link down to his channel in the description field so it's easy for you to find it, as well as the comment section. So go ahead and click over there, subscribe, hit that all notifications bell. As a YouTuber, we really enjoy that. We can see the percentage of our subscribers that are hitting the bell icon. And you guys have been knocking out of the park on the channel recently. Insane. So yeah, I just want to say thank you guys. You guys have been amazing. My channel members, my Patreons, everybody. I love you guys, and have a good night. Also, don't touch your pee-pee at night, because God's watching you.